Just getting ready for our next island camping adventure, and there are some interesting and big changes happening to some of the lakes that we fish on and island camp on, and I want to talk to you about it. In this episode, I'll cover how you go about finding all this information and how I feel about these changes that are happening and how they're going to affect Anthony's Outdoors. Back in 2024, the Wisconsin DNR announced that beginning in 2025, that the DNR boat-in campsites scattered around the Chippewa flowage would require reservations and a nightly fee. I knew it was only a matter of time before the other big flowages that we go to all the time, i.e. the turtle flambeau flowage, the willow flowage, would soon follow suit. And sure enough, this spring, that's exactly what the DNR did. So the first thing you're going to do is you're just going to type in the lake that you want to go to. So let's do the willow flowage, for example. All right, and what you're going to be looking for is the Department of Natural Resources website, the .gov website, and you're going to click on that, and this is going to pop up, and bam, right away, big orange box. So you're going to click here. All right, and again, another notice for the DNR owned property. Here's all your information, and to obviously, if you're going to want to reserve, here you go. You click here on the reserve button, and that's going to pull up the Wisconsin State Park System. I consent, yada yada. So you got to click boat in, all right, because all the sites on the willow flowage, turtle flambeau, Chippewa flowage, for the most part, are boat-in only. I suppose you could hike to some of them that are on the mainland, but that would be an adventure in and of itself. So you're going to click boat in, and then you're going to go to, and you're going to pick your lake. So you could pick the Chippewa flowage, turtle flambeau. We're going to use the willow flowage as our example. You're going to pick your dates. All right, so let's pick what would typically be our Pike-a-thon week. That's where we usually go, and it's usually in May, and it's usually Mother's Day weekend. So you pick your start date and your end date, 2 nights. We'll say the party size is 4. You must pick your equipment. So you're going to pick your tent. You're not bringing a truck camper out there, and you're going to hit search. Now what's going to happen is it's going to populate your screen, and this is where you got to click. So at first I was like, how does this work? I zoom in, nothing shows up. You have to actually click on this blue box here, this area here. So you click on that, and now it brings up all the campsites. Now, as you can see here, they have different color coding to basically tell you what's going on. So green is available, orange is restrictions. Typically what that means is that your dates that you put in, something's not jiving, something's not lining up, there's someone overlapping with you, that kind of thing. Some of these sites, when you click on them, they will have pictures. Some of them do not. So just, if you've never been out there on these bodies of water, just know that what you're getting is going to be usually a picnic table, a fire ring with a fire grate, and an open air pit toilet that probably needs to be serviced. But that's a conversation for a little later. So then you pick your site, right? We're going to pick 23. This is a pretty popular site, big sand frontage. And as you can see, it is $20 a night. Okay, so you picked your site. You're going to click reserve. And this is really interesting and kind of annoying, and we're going to get into this as well. So it's a 1 p.m. checkout time and a 3 p.m. check-in time. So I don't know what they're planning to do with those 2 hours. I highly doubt that wardens or DNR staff are going to go out there and actually change placards or signs or do any maintenance during that time, but they do have a 2-hour window there. So you acknowledge this, and then it's just going to go into, you've got to check your reservations, and then you go through their payment process, and it's pretty simple. Okay, now that you've seen how the reservation system works, let's talk about some of the positives and negatives when it comes to these new regulations and how it's going to affect our channel. Some of the positives, all right? You know well in advance that your site will be available. Reducing stress and anxiety of finding a spot before darkness sets in is going to be huge. There have been a lot of trips where we have had to postpone when we get there because we knew we would be landing at night, and just trying to find a site in the dark, especially if the site's occupied and you're shining lights, it's just really rude and inconsiderate. And we instead would leave in the middle of the night so that we would get there at first light and be able to see what we're doing and not disturb anybody that may be on those sites. So that's a huge positive in my book. Another positive is it's going to allow for easier planning well in advance, especially if you go on these camping trips with larger groups, kind of like we do for Pikeathon. Typically, what I'd have to do is I'd have to go out a day in advance of everybody else and find a suitable site that was large enough for the number of people that were coming on the trip, which I didn't mind doing. I kind of enjoyed that reconnaissance aspect of it all. But now knowing that we have a site dedicated for our group, 6 months to a year in advance is a huge burden off of our shoulders. With these new regulations and reservations, this is going to keep people from squatting on islands. Now, it's not super common, but I have seen both on island campsites and on rustic campsites that are free, especially in Minnesota, individuals will set up camp and they will stay for far longer than they are allowed to. And there really isn't anybody out there checking on them. And aside from, myself or someone else calling the authorities to report them, which I'm not a fan of doing either, they would just stay there indefinitely or until, they got bored of the site. So I think with these new reservations and having to pay for these sites, that should cut down on anybody squatting on those islands and overstaying their welcome big time. All right, now that we got the positives out of the way, let's talk about some of the negatives. One thing that's going to kind of, get at me a little bit here is it removes the mystery and excitement of finding an open site. Especially for those true adventure seekers out there and those people that like to fly by the seat of their pants, this removes that aspect of it. For some people, that's a blessing. The anxiety of all that is gone. But for others that, really enjoy that thrill of finding an open site and being able to call it your own and set up camp, that's gone now. And there's a part of me that's going to miss that for sure. Definitely. Next thing here that's kind of a negative is price. Now, $20 a night for camping isn't a lot of money when it comes to, staying at like a designated campground or some of the national forest campgrounds that charge that or more. But it is more than free $99, as I had mentioned earlier. So for some people, price may be a barrier for entry, especially for those longer trips. We used to be able to go on an island camping trip completely free for 4 to 7 days at a time and never spend a dime. Now at $20 a night, these trips can easily cost you a couple $100 just in fees. As you saw when we clicked through the computer screen there, a lot of the sites are already reserved for next year. And for some people, that can be a really big bummer. And many people don't plan their life out that far in advance, or they don't have the ability to plan their life out that far in advance. They don't know when they're getting vacation time or when they're going to be able to, plan trips with the rest of the family or whatever it might be. That's a long time in advance for anybody to plan a trip. Now, here at Anthony's Outdoors, over the years, we have made it kind of a habit to plan well in advance, especially when it comes to things like the Pikeathon. The other members that show up every year, they kind of give me a hard time about it because I start planning for Pikeathon of the next year while we're still on Pikeathon of that current year. A full year in advance, and I'm already doing the calculations and trying to figure out who's coming, and that's just how my brain works. So that works for me. But for other people, I can see that having to plan out that far in advance may be a massive issue. Now let's talk about the wait and see period, okay? These aren't positives, these aren't negatives. These are just things that, with the addition of these regulations and the fees, we're going to see how this affects, the long-term usage of these island sites. My expectation is that these fees that are being taken for these sites should be used for upgrades at these sites. Things like, improved or rebuilt picnic tables, new fire grates and fire pits, modernized open air toilets, because if you've ever stayed on some of these sites, you are literally sitting on top of a plywood box with a hole cut in it. And I think that many of them could use a serious upgrade when it comes to the toilet situation. Just more routine maintenance, going through and clearing out that underbrush, that stuff that harbors all those mosquitoes and ticks. The sites that we stay on that have limited underbrush are so much more enjoyable than the ones that are super thickly packed with the choke cherry and the raspberry bushes and the blueberry bushes and stuff like that. Those sites are always loaded with tons of ticks and skeeters, and if they could clear that stuff out and make some of these sites a little bit more open to breeze and sunlight, I think that would be a huge, huge benefit and keep the bugs down a little bit. Last but not least, and I know I'm asking for a lot here, is I would like to see the DNR install floating docks on some of the more difficult to land sites. One, for ADA accessibility, allowing people with disabilities to get out into the outdoors and enjoy everything that those remote sites have to offer, I think should be a high priority on their list. Two, many of these sites have really rocky shorelines that a lot of people aren't going to want to park their boat on, or they've got very shallow, sandy approaches that, depending on the type of boat that you have, when you go to land, you don't even get to shore. You might be 10, 20, even 30 feet off from shore. So I think having floating docks in some of those scenarios would definitely help with accessibility issues. Seeing as the majority of our trips include island camping, or at the very least camping in a campground, I find that these new regulations will be a welcome sight. This will definitely reduce my stress of finding a site, as well as saving a ton of fuel and time driving all over the lake looking for an open site, especially on those busy holiday weekends. I'm super hopeful that the DNR will use these funds appropriately and improve these boat-in sites for the future so that other people that watch these videos, that go out to these places, can enjoy the outdoors easier and more efficiently. All right, you know what to do. Let me know down in the comments how you feel about all of this that's going on. I know there's been a lot of flack thrown around towards the DNR on some of the Facebook pages that I follow, but I want to hear what you have to say and your perspectives down in the comments. If you like this video, hit that like button. It really does help out the channel. And as always, thanks for watching.